Welcome to the Pragmatic Hero's Journey, a monthly podcast about becoming a pragmatic author, hosted by Tammy Corin and Tim Mitra. This episode was recorded on January 13, 2021. On this episode, Tammy and Tim talk with Brasseur about her journey to becoming a pragmatic author. The Pragmatic Hero's Journey is owned and operated by the Pragmatic Programmers LLC, home of the Pragmatic Bookshelf. Founded by Andy Hunt and Dave Thomas, the Pragmatic Programmers has one simple goal: to improve the lives of professional developers.
We have to act like adults now. She's here.
I admitted Vicky.
You admitted her?
I had to admit her. I
Oh,
had to
right.
say
Yeah,
yes.
Oh, no more surprise. No more surprises
No more
where the guest
surprise
just shows
guests.
up on us and catches us goofing around.
Yeah, now we get to admit them. Hi, Vicky.
Wow, surprise guest would have been really exciting.
Yeah, well, yeah. So I don't know if Tammy told you, but I'm Tim. I'm in Toronto, Canada.
Well, hi, Tim in Toronto.
And where are you coming from, Vicky?
I'm currently in lovely Portland, Oregon.
Portland? Oh, way over there. Wow.
Yeah.
All right, you got to help
Cool.
the geographically challenged. Where exactly are you time zone wise? What? You know I'm geographically challenged.
She's on the left coast. She's on the left coast.
I'm on the leftist of left coast.
So she's 2 hours ahead of you, 3 hours ahead of me.
Yeah.
Time zones are hard. Tammy doesn't do math very well.
I don't do math. I don't do time zones. I don't do geography.
She just writes books on vectors and stuff like that, but she doesn't do that.
Yeah, but you don't actually need math for that.
Thank you so much. Okay, like you just propelled yourself to the highest level of coolness.
She's like our
in my
favorite
book.
guest so far, right?
Yes,
Thank
so
you.
far. Yes.
Wow, that was easy. All right, it's a wrap. Done.
The number one guest. Yeah.
Number one guest.
Yeah.
And she actually is the number one
And
guest.
one
too,
guess,
right?
exactly.
Yeah.
Well, it's all uphill from here.
So, Vicky, welcome to the show.
Well, hi. It's lovely to be here.
We are so excited to have you here. And as you probably read in your email, we're just sort of go with the flow, sit back, have a chat, talk about what's what, what's not what, and see where it goes.
I can do that. I can even try and keep it PG-13 and keep the swearing to a minimum.
Well, luckily, we have a little button in a little podcast thing that we can mark explicit. So if something should inadvertently slip out, we can either mark it explicit, or I can go find a really cool duck noise and just, put that in instead of the explicit, you might say.
So you've played the Goose Game, right?
Goose Game? We were just talking about the Goose Game.
She's talking about a different Goose Game. Now I feel like I'm going to have to put our pre-show in this podcast so people can make this connection. We were just talking about Tim's Goose Game, but I know what Goose Game you're talking about, and that goose was a little jerk.
That goose is totally a little jerk, but somebody tweeted out, hey, here's where you can find the goose sound, the honk, and here's how you can set it as your error sound in your terminal on Mac OS. So I've got that little guy honking at me all the time, and if I do accidentally drop an F-bomb, that would be perfect.
Well, you'll have to send me that little honking sound, because now I feel like I just want to say an F-bomb just to use it in this show and be like, hey, Vicky said. So
well, you can go ahead and just drop the F-bomb now, and that gives you a good reason to use the honk.
Oh, good fucking point.
Ooh, yeah. All right. And I'm writing a to-do item right now to make sure to send you the honk.
Yes, please do.
Send the honk to Tammy. There's something I was not expecting to type today, but that's all right.
Oh, goodness gracious. So, Vicky, let's really get into the show and let our listeners know who you are, a little bit about you, how you got into tech, where you're going. Gosh, I have so many questions to ask. I'm sure Tim has so many questions to ask you, but let's start with the basics, who you are and what you do.
Hi, everyone. I am VM Brasseur, but because we're all friends here, you can call me Vicky. I am a corporate strategist specializing in free and open source software. So that means I help companies be more successful by releasing, contributing to, and just being good citizens in the free and open source software world. So that's my day job. That's what I get paid to do. It does also mean that I have spent a great deal of time in the free and open source software world. My guesstimate now is 30 or so years in and around free and open source software in some capacity. So fairly knowledgeable about that. pretty knowledgeable about that whole corporate strategy thing, why you're doing and how to do it right so you can actually keep a roof over the head of your employees. And yeah, that's who I am and what I do. And I have 2 lovely cats, and I'm currently sitting in Portland, Oregon. There you go.
Right. So does that mean that like they're publishing software so that well, free and open source. So obviously, like it's like companies coming with their IP, making it available to people, and then but not charging them for it, right?
So free in English is a rather encumbered word. We've got way too many meanings that go behind the single word free. We've got free as in freedom, like Braveheart, freedom sort of thing. But we also have free as in gratis, as in just doesn't cost you anything. So free software is free as in freedom. And that's really what it means. It's, however, also does not necessarily cost you any money. You can go and download the software for free if you want and use it for free. But it is free as in puppy, as we say in free software, which means now that you've got to take care of it. So there are hidden costs in there. Just because you don't have to pay for the license for the software, like you do, for instance, when you used to buy, I don't know, do people buy Windows anymore? So, you pay to license the software. You don't have to do that necessarily for free and open source software. You can just download it and install it and use it, but you still have to maintain it. And so it can cost you money to get somebody to help support that, or otherwise modify it or configure it, or, just sort of the care and feeding of your free and open source software.
Are you talking about like upgrading for exploits and stuff like that, and software updates and things like that?
Yeah.
Where are you going?
That's something you should definitely be paying for someone to do, because otherwise you are just one bad day away from being the next Equifax.
Right.
That is what happened to Equifax, is that they were using this piece of, I believe it was open source. I don't think this one was free software. It doesn't matter. Anyway, they were using this piece of free and open source software that had been updated to fix an exploit. And so the latest version was correct, but the version that they were using was way out of date.
Right.
And so it hadn't fixed the exploit. Somebody snuck in, took the information of billions of people. And so that's why you really need to pay attention to what's in your free and open source software supply chain from a business perspective. Right? It's one of the many reasons to do that, but that's the one that typically gets executives to raise their eyebrows and go, oh, really? Maybe we should pay more attention to this.
However, did you get involved in free and open source software?
Actually not via the route you would think. So way back in the early 90s, a bunch of friends and I used to spend a great deal of time in the computer lab, as one did in those days, because who had a computer in their dorm room? How crazy is that?
Right.
So we'd spend a lot of time in the computer lab, and down there cruising around Gopher and Archie, and I discovered something called Project Gutenberg, which still exists and is still cranking out new texts every single day. And what Project Gutenberg does is it takes things that are in the public domain and it makes them more accessible. And it started with a number of texts that you may or may not know of, little things like, Alice's Adventure in Wonderland, Through the Looking Glass, the CIA fact book, stuff like that. And I discovered that and I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. This is just so cool. You can just download books for free. And remember, this was like 1991, where you didn't have Kindle, you didn't have openlibrary.org, you didn't have stuff like that where you can go and just get books. So this was really cool to me. And it also really appealed to me just from a personal perspective. I at the time was in a science major. And to me, one of the best, most fabulous things about science is that people are publishing what they have learned. So the people who come after them can build upon that. And this is how we get things like being able to turn around a vaccine for a pandemic in just a matter of months, because so many people have done all that work before us. And what I saw with Project Gutenberg was this is a way for us to share documents and to really make them more accessible for people so we can also build upon these. And that really appealed to me. At the same time, it was, these were the days of Usenet. So I soon after discovering, or contemporaneous, right around there, with Project Gutenberg, I discovered Usenet. And Usenet is where free and open source software really started to pick up. At the time, it was actually only free software. So free software harkens back to about 40 years, plus or minus from today-ish, 40-ish years. So I'm not going to get into the differences between free and open source software. That's section of my book. I suggest you buy the book and read it. There's the plug. There you go, Brian. So it was only free software at the time. There were lots of news groups around that. And so you could go to the news group and you could discover that here's this thing called free software, which is exactly like, or at least analogous to people sharing their science, except people are sharing their software in a way that you can then take it and build upon it and build new software that really iterates upon the original one. And this to me was just amazing. So I paid a lot of attention to that sort of thing. And it just pushed all the right buttons in my brain, you know? And so I just sort of stuck with that for the past 30 or so years.
So that brings up my next point. You mentioned your book and how you go into the differences between free and open source software and so on and so forth. So how do you make the switch from getting into all of this cool stuff and programming and so on and so forth to writing a book? I mean, you've got Forge Your Future with open source. So clearly you have a passion there, but how do you make that leap from developer or, just person who's interested in tech to someone who's writing about tech and teaching other people about the thing that you're passionate about?
Well, I have been writing for quite a long time. And so I've got just dozens and dozens of articles to my name. I've got dozens and dozens of talks to my name. I do a great deal of public speaking and a great deal of blog posts and just article writing for various publications. So that part wasn't hard. And so the step from writing 1-hour talks or 2,000 word blog posts into writing a book, I gotta admit it was really intimidating. And it's something that I certainly had considered, but not something that I really was seriously considering just because it was so intimidating. I know that writing a book is different from writing just a series of blog posts because you have to have this arc and everything needs to hold together well and be consistent throughout the entire book. Whereas if you pick up a book that's pretty much just a series of blog posts back to back, you can tell. And frankly, I don't like those kind of books. So it was not really something I was going to do. But I have now found that the best way to get to write a book is to befriend a book editor.
Okay.
Because whether you like it or not, you will be approached to write a book. And that's actually what happened with me because my editor, Brian McDonald, he was the editor for some friends of mine a few years ago at a previous publisher. And so I got to know him and we got to be good friends. And he was sitting in a proposals meeting at Prague one day, and Andy essentially stamped his little princess foot saying, "Dang it. What we really need is a book about how to contribute to open source." Brian said, "Stick a pin in that. I will be right back with you." And came to me and said, "Look, Vicky, there's no one else who could write this book." I was like, I need to think about this for a bit. And I did. I hemmed and I hawed and I thought about it a great deal, and I knew exactly what I was getting into because thankfully I did know a publisher. And so or somebody who worked in the publishing industry, and I was able to hit him up with a lot of questions, and that helped to reduce a lot of my fears while also setting expectations appropriately. But since then, I have met a lot of people in the publishing industry. And what I've found is that they're all really approachable. It's just that people in tech don't know that because book publishing just seems like this really spooky thing, right? And so therefore it's spooky, it's unknown, it's intimidating. And we kind of put editors up on pedestals to some extent, and therefore they don't feel as approachable. Whereas y'all lovely people, and you want to help people get their knowledge out there. And that's one thing I try to help people with now is as they come to me, I'm like, this is a great idea. You know what? I bet you could write a book about that. Let me tell you about my experiences. And so I've spoken with several people about my experiences with that and introduced them to people in the publishing industry. definitely at Prag, because I had a very good experience at Prag myself, and I want more people to write there. But you know, that's how I did it. Brian came to me and he said, "You can do this," and I believed him, despite not believing myself. And then I managed to do it, and it was not easy, but it was really worthwhile. Not monetarily, but nobody writes a book to make money.
What was the time frame around that? Like when are we talking? 10 years
This
ago, 5
was
years ago?
no, this was 2000 and did he approach me in 2017? 2018 is when he approached me. I was in the middle of getting pseudo laid off from a company at the time, and I had to lay off my entire team. And then Brian happens to come to me with this book thing, and so I had rather a few balls in the air at that moment, which is another reason why I had to take some time to think about it. So it really wasn't the best time for me, but it turned out to be not really. I'm not convinced there is a good time, because if you wait for the perfect time, you are never going to do it. You know, there's never the perfect time really for most things. You always end up having to flex and change and modify, and you do have to kind of modify your day-to-day life when you're writing a book. You can't just say, "Oh, I'll do it when I feel like it." It's like exercising. You kind of have to do it every day. Otherwise, it's not going to add up and get you to your goal.
Right.
You mentioned blog posts, that you were writing blog posts and conference talks and things like that before you wrote this book. How would you say that experience is different or the same, between writing a book and writing those other things?
So I have been very fortunate in the editors I've worked with, and other publications, where we've been able to work together really, really well. And I think, Brian and I also have that really great relationship. So that worked really, really well. But it meant that I already had the experience of being able to go to the editor and say, "I don't know what I'm doing here. What are you actually looking for? What do we actually need?" So in that way, it was very, very similar, because I just kind of had this background of knowing that the editor is there to make me as successful as possible, and they're not going to allow me to publish anything and look like an idiot. Editors are just magnificent people. I've said that before, but now that I've actually gone through the book process, I wholeheartely believe it. Copy editors, we might have to have a few words, but development editors are great. But it was different in that when I write a blog post, you may or may not be able to tell, but I use a lot of words. So when I write a blog post, there is no limit. And I can edit myself down, or I can make it longer. When I publish something for instance, opensource.com or FOSS Life or any of the other places I've published, they do have a word limit. And so I do have to kind of edit things down and have my ideas differently arranged. With a book, it takes it to that next level, because if I'm talking about, for instance, copyright in chapter 2, I have to consistently use the same wording and the same arc and direction in chapter 5, in chapter 11, and keep things consistent across the entire work, such that I can reinforce topics in a way that I frankly don't need to do for a blog post or an article. I can just throw those away, write one and it's done, and I can move on to the next thing. With a book, you don't get to do that. Because especially with technical books or other books that are intended to inform and educate, you have to keep that in mind the entire time. Who is my audience? How can I help them be more successful? How can I help them learn this thing that I am so passionate about, such that they can also be successful with it? And that means having a consistent narrative and consistent wording and consistent just everything throughout the entire thing, to try and bring your reader gently along with you on that journey. And that you don't have to do that for a blog post, just screw it.
So with the book, did you keep separate notes for that? Like, take me through the whole writing process that you did. Not maybe like the in-depth stuff, but like just the general overview. Like, how did you approach it? What were you thinking when you started to work with Brian? When you were like, oh goodness, I've been signed. Now what?
Well, thankfully, a lot of the process with Prag makes you think of this stuff in advance. So even to do a proposal, I know definitely with Prag, but sorry, when I say Prag to everyone in the audience, that is Pragmatic Bookshelf. So with Prag, they want to see an outline so you can prove that you've actually put thought into it, that you know what you're going to be saying, that you're not trying to say too much or too little or go into the weeds. So that really is incredibly helpful. But what I found is that I would then separate that into separate files for chapters and then explode that outline into a super outline for each individual chapter and just iteratively outline to the point where you've got so much outline that it just starts turning into sentences, which coalesce into paragraphs, into sections. But as I'm doing that, I'm also rearranging and I'm adding new bits that I completely missed in the first rough outline. And it's very much an iterative process, at which it lends itself very well to people who have worked with software before and coding, because you do kind of do that, code, test, iterate, code, test, iterate, the exact same thing, but with writing. You write, test, iterate. And that really helps a great deal, I think, to just kind of keep that mindset. In many ways, coding is just writing for computers.
So is there an overarching story, like what you want this book to tell from beginning to end, or does that kind of evolve as you go through the process, like it can with software, right?
Yeah, it can, but I've done so much writing that I have a good concept of what I want for my books. And I knew specifically, I wrote out a profile of, here is my, perhaps not ideal, but my target audience member. And from time to time, I would go back to that audience member and that profile to remind myself, this is the person you're targeting. Make sure all of your wording is going to them and what you want them to be able to do at the end. I want this person at the end to be able to make a successful contribution to a free and open source project and to become a really an authentic community member, not just to be there because they have to be, but to be there because they know why. They know what they're getting out of it. They know what the project is getting out of it. And that's going to be success at the end. So what can I do from beginning to end? Where are the milestones in there to move them along that path? And so that's how I organize my outline. First, you need to know something like this, and then this, and then this, and just move them along that path. So at the end, they can go to any open source project and they can go, yes, I have a pretty decent sense of what I should be doing here. And it's one very important thing for me as I was writing the book was, again, that audience member profile, because that profile was not for a programmer. It was for anyone who is interested in contributing to free and open source software.
I have to stop you now because you say it wasn't for a programmer, but for people who want to contribute to free and open source software. And I'm sitting here wondering, well, how would a non-programmer contribute to something like that? So I'm just curious about that statement.
Well, it's like any other software, right? When you're sitting there, if you happen to be in tech and you're listening to this, you're sitting there at whatever desk you're using, probably at home, and you're working on your software. Okay. If you're a coder, you know exactly what you're doing and you're just coding away and committing and, going through your Jira tickets or whatever.
Right.
But you're not the only type of person who is developing that software that you're going to ship out to your customers. You have designers, you have security people, you have infrastructure, you have marketing, you have tech writers. There are tons of different roles that are required to successfully ship software. And it's really no different for free and open source software. There are tons of different roles that are needed. Maybe the person taking on that role happens to be a programmer, but they don't have to be. And frankly, in many cases, they probably shouldn't be, because a lot of the really bad user experience we have out there with software is because programmers think they can just do it all, and they can't. You specialize in programming and you're great at that. There are other people who have dedicated their lives to understanding all about design and usability and accessibility and security. Why aren't you opening your doors and asking them to come and help you, to free you up to do more programming and be more successful at that, while they can do what they're really good at, and then they can make your project more successful for your end users, rather than simply focusing on programmers, because they are not the end all be all of all things software.
I'm so glad you said that, because myself included, like when I think about software, because of my role in this industry, I immediately go to the development of that software. And then secondly, I go to the design of that software. And here, I didn't stop to think about all of the other roles and all of the other responsibilities required to make that software. Marketing and technical documentation and just all of these other things that you mentioned. It just sort of like it's a wash for me. So I'm so thankful that you called that out.
Yeah, it was really important to me that the book be accessible to anyone who wants to be a part of free and open source software. I mean, it's as you look at yourself as a software user, and you look at the software that makes you happy. What is it that it makes you happy about that? Well, if it's a library that you're using, you want that to be really, really well documented, don't you? You do. Well, odds are, if you get a technical writer in to do that, they're going to do a better job than most programmers do, because programmers are focused on programming and they're great at that. And they often don't feel they have the time to dedicate to technical writing because they're very focused on programming. Great. Can't fault them on that. Maybe if you bring in a technical writer, you're going to make your users more successful. And if your users are more successful, they're more likely to tell their friends, and therefore your project and your software starts to become more successful, all because you brought in a technical writer. How did you find out about that software that you're using? I mean, if it's free and open source, you may have one way of doing it, but if it's not, for instance, how did you learn about the, let's say the game Among Us? How did you learn about that? Well, possibly word of mouth by your friends going, oh my gosh, we need to play this new game. One of us is evil, right? But sorry, spoiler alert. Or it could have been something like an advertisement you saw. It could be a blog post you saw written by a developer relations or a developer evangelist person, and so it could be something completely different. And that's marketing, right? You're going to make your free and open source software more successful if you're able to bring someone in who is able to get that word out in a more efficient way, who is dedicated to doing that, who's dedicated to doing, for instance, community management or bug triage or any of these other things that you maybe don't have enough time to do well. Well, in order to do that, you need to teach them how to contribute to free and open source software.
And let's be honest, marketing is its own beast, right? In its own right. I don't even know how marketing people do it the way that they do it. I'm just like, here's my thing, buy it or not. But marketing people, they have such a way of making things important to people. And they are. Certain things are important to certain people. And it blows my mind the way that marketing people think and work and act. I love it.
There's a reason it's a full-time job, right?
Right?
And it's a specialization. Yeah. I love marketing. So I'm a former programmer. When I don't do corporate strategy, I lead software development teams at the VP level. While I no longer push all the buttons to make the things go beep and boop, I am definitely more on the technical side of things. But I am so enamored of marketing, because if you do marketing well in an authentic way, you are going to end up with a much more successful customer and user Because marketing isn't just about advertising and outreach. It's about knowing your market and knowing what they need and what's going to help them be successful and what are their problems and how do they speak. How can you reach out to them in a way that they will actually listen to you. And how can you write documentation in a way that they will actually pay attention and understand what you're saying? Without a really good marketing team, you're not going to be able to do that. And I know that marketing's gotten a bad rap, justifiably so. When you've got companies like Facebook that are just scraping all of your data, right? That's a form of marketing, but not necessarily a good one. That's violating your privacy and, all sorts of wonky things that we're just not going to get into. But when you've got good marketing that actually understands what they're there to do and that they are there to be a bigger part of the team and to make your company more successful, it is just, it's just like sprinkling salt on a bland dish. It suddenly comes to life with good marketing. And so I'm very enamored of marketing. Yago team.
So now you got all that in place. Like, what would you say? You're focusing on what you do best. What do you say is the most difficult part about writing a book?
It's hard to stay focused, and it's easy to get distracted, which sounds like two separate things, but it sounds like the same thing, but it's actually two separate things. So one of the things I frequently hit when I'm writing that I think I know exactly what I'm talking about, but I don't. And so I will just keep banging my head against things to make things work. And it only ends up frustrating me, which makes me start to second guess myself. And I end up just completely unable to focus because I'm too busy questioning myself. What the heck are you doing? Why do you think you can write this? This is ridiculous. You are just, just give it up, right? And that's really difficult to deal with and to get over. And then there's the, oh crap, I left dishes in the dishwasher, or, oh, look, there's a bird out the window, or, oh, hey, somebody sent me a new email. All right, rather than being able to just put your head down and write. And these are two completely separate issues, but I find they're frequently resolved in a similar way, which is to recognize it. And that's always the biggest step. Recognize that you're starting to spin your wheels, that you're starting to spiral, that you're starting to, float off into la la land.
Well, how do you recognize that you bring up a good point?
A lot of experience, frankly. And a lot of questioning yourself in healthy ways.
Like, why the heck are you doing that? What are you thinking?
Exactly. Or so rather than going that direction, thinking, oh, wait, why are you having such a hard time now? Maybe you need to take a step back and, regroup and then try again. Or maybe you need to take a step back and do something else because your brain is chewing on something and it needs more time. Right. And so you go do something else for a little bit. You go fold that laundry. You go wash those dishes. And then when you come back, oh, wait, everything's great and free again. But what I find works for me more often lately is just to start kind of free form mind mapping, sort of. Oh, you're thinking about this. Well, fine. I'm going to give you permission, brain, to just write whatever you want. Doesn't matter. It's not right. It's not wrong. It just is. Just write whatever you want. You're writing a chapter about licensing and you keep hitting a wall on that. Great. Just start spewing crap. And however you do that doesn't matter. Is it on a whiteboard? Is it on index cards? Is it in my Vim window? Is it on my mind mapping software? It doesn't bloody matter. Just get it out of your head in some way.
How much of that inner thought do you take to your editor when you're trying to work all this out? Like, do you be like, hey, Brian, I was running through all this stuff in my mind and I can't pull it out and figure out where I want to go? Or do you sort of internalize that, deal with it, and then hand over what you've come up with to your editor and be like, okay, dude, you got this. Let me know what you think.
I tend to give Brian finished product. And work through everything myself. But when I'm working with others, I try to reiterate to them that I am here to help you should you need it. One of the things I used to do is I was essentially an acquiring editor, although also an author for opensource.com. And I go to tons of conferences when we can do that sort of thing. And I would meet people who had these really great projects or these interesting stories and these things they were doing. And I'd say, wow, you should totally get published. Here's this site I work with. They have over 2 million readers a month. I will help you get an article placed with them. And I would work with people who had never really done anything like that before. And with them, I would, whatever you need. Are you hitting a wall? Are you need to talk anything through? Everybody has different needs. So what works for me, and me handing Brian pretty much, finished copy, that worked for me because I've done this a lot and I'm able to now look at myself and go, okay, you've been spinning on this for a week and that is about 6 days too long. Let's pause and look at why you're doing this. I can do that now, but a lot of people can't. And it's okay. Right? It takes a lot of experience. All you need to know is your editor is there to help you. Like I said before, they want you to be as successful as possible, and they are not going to let you release anything that looks like crap. They're going to help you, and they're not going to be judgmental, and they're not going to be jerks about it. They've been through, wow, so much. Every editor I know has the most amazing war stories, and they know how to deal with this stuff because they've been through it all. And so I do encourage everyone always to ask for help or to check in frequently with your editor. I think that's something that most authors probably should do. And if and or when I write my next book, I will probably try to do it more. My schedule was really weird and I couldn't do this last time, but have a weekly or bi-weekly call, at least 15, 30 minutes with your editor, just quickly. It's like, hey, this is what's going on. This is what I'm thinking. And they can go, yay, go team, you're doing great. And that, it helps to keep you motivated. It's a lot like a stand-up call in development, right? When you're sitting there with your team, hi, I'm working on this, I'm having trouble with that. Exactly the same sort of thing. And it can keep things moving. Your editor is so great. Let them help you. That's what they're paid to do. Let them do their job.
So that brings up another question for me, is that, there's been a lot of talk and probably more. Okay, so let me back up a little bit. 10, 15 years ago, maybe 20 years ago, whatever, Tim knows, I am terrible at math. So whatever the time frame was years ago, there was this stigma of self-publishing versus traditional publishing. And then everyone was like, no, self-publishing is bad. And then everyone was like, oh, self-publishing is good. And the kind of feeling now, it's sort of, it's muddled, like it's 50-50. And me personally, like I am all for working with a team of people and going, quote unquote, the traditional route. And I use quote unquote because, you can think about bigger traditional publishers or smaller houses or whatnot. But the point I'm trying to make is, where do you feel you fit in with self-publishing versus traditional publishing, whether it be with a bigger house or a smaller house? For me, I'm like, dude, I want that team behind me because I need that motivation, that push, that extra, hey, look, what are you working on? Where are you at? Here, let me make this better for you. But I know there are some people out there, especially some of our listeners, that might be thinking, well, I can do this on my own. No problem. I've got all these tools now that I didn't have 20 years ago. I totally got this. I'm curious where you fit in that, because you do your own blog posts and things like that. So what do you say?
So I have read a lot of, or I've tried reading a lot of self-published books, and almost all of them are crap. And it's not because the content is bad. It's not because the writing is bad. It's because people are trying to go it their own way, and everybody needs editors, and they assume I'm a great writer. Everybody understands what I'm saying. So I don't need an editor. And the answer is no, you do need an editor. I am a really good writer, but I need an editor. With all of these blog posts, I run them past a number of people, typically before I publish them, because I know I'm not infallible. I make mistakes, I typo, I need somebody else to look at that and to go, not really sure what you're saying here. With every conference proposal, I run it past some people I know and I trust, and I really care about their opinion, and I know they're going to give me an informed and honest opinion. No, Vicky, that talk proposal is just crap, or that doesn't make any sense. With every talk I do, I try and run it past people because I'm not infallible. And that most of these people who are doing this self-publishing, oh my God, get a copy editor, get a development editor, get somebody to help you whittle this down. I did just recently read a book that it's about 700 pages and it's ongoing. And the content in it is incredibly valuable to me as a corporate strategist. This is just primo stuff, but it is being self-published and it could use a lot of work from an editing perspective. The content is amazing. The author is really, really good, but man, so if you're going to go the self-publishing route, you still, if you want to be effective, if you want to have a good end product, you still need to pay for an editor. So why don't you go with a traditional publisher? Because you don't only get a development editor who is there to help you every step of the way, which is just invaluable, right? That's a superpower, right? But you also get people who are going to copy edit it and make sure that you aren't using the wrong which versus that sort of thing, and you sound like a reasonable human being. You're going to have people who will make sure it is laid out appropriately. People who are going to test on every single popular e-reader. Make sure your ebook actually loads on it. That's not something you need to do. Well, if you self-publish, it is. Somebody who will give you that storefront of where to sell this sort of thing. Yeah, you can go via Amazon, but they take a pretty considerable cut, and often you don't get any sort of say in the price that your book goes out on Amazon. So there's so many things that you get from going with a traditional publisher. You can go the self-publishing route, but just know what you're getting into. And if nothing else, please, there are great editors out there who do this freelance. Hire one.
Cool. All right. So we have this section of the show we're calling Inside the Pragmatic Studio Questions. And so we have, I don't know, like 6 or 7 questions we'd like to ask you, just sort of get some sort of free form sort of ideas from you. Okay.
Okay. I'll
you ready
try and keep it brief.
All right. Well, that's fine. You can, Tammy can edit. She's an editor.
Yay for post-production. Huzzah.
All right. So we'll dig in. You get to take the wrapper off these questions. So first question is, who's your biggest influence?
In life?
In anything. Could be Jean-Luc Picard. Could be anything.
Wait a second. I just have to interrupt. What is it with you and Jean-Luc Picard, Tim? Everything is always Jean-Luc Picard.
He's your favorite captain.
He's my favorite captain, but not yours. Anyway.
No, he's not my favorite captain. That's fine.
I'm sorry, Vicky. I didn't mean
he's
to interrupt
just trying
your
to be
question.
inclusive.
I wasn't prepping her for the final question either. Just so you know.
That's good, because it's not Jean-Luc Picard. So
thank goodness.
I don't even know how I could answer that question, because it just depends upon the context, right? Who's the most influential person in cooking that I pay attention to? Who's the most influential person in writing? Who's the most influential?
See, you
By
are
the way, you're helping
up,
us unit test our
you
questions.
are.
Right?
You really are. Talk about iteration and unit testing. Yes, you make a very valid point, Vicky.
Well, I also do corporate strategy, and so my answer to almost everything is going to start with "it depends."
Depends, exactly. Yep.
Right. But one of the most influential people in my life was a Greek professor an ancient Greek professor I had in university. My second degree is in classics, ancient Greek. Officially, it's Latin. So I do have a Latin degree, but really it's an ancient Greek. And that professor rewrote the way my brain worked. And he did it in such a powerful way that it's really influenced so much of how I approach just everything since then. And so, God, Carl has had such an amazing impact on my life. I'm really, really grateful that I failed his class the first time and then took it again.
So in 20 words or less, how did he rewrite your brain?
I now am able to break things down in a completely different way and not only see what things are doing, but why. That's what I want to see.
Cool. All right. What do you like most about your favorite programming language?
I don't care about programming languages very much anymore, but when I did program, it was Perl, and that was my primary programming language. I've done others as well, but Perl makes more sense to me. I am, however, coming at this from more of a linguistic point of view, and Larry Wall wrote it from a linguistic point of view. So it just meshes well with how I think of language and programming.
Okay, cool. So what is your favorite text editor or IDE and why?
I like Vim because it is the very first thing I used. And so that's what I learned. And frankly, I think that Emacs has got too many arcane button combinations, and it's just, it doesn't make as much sense for me.
Wait, now did you say button combinations, or do I need to call the goose honking here?
No honking, actually button. You push the buttons.
Just checking.
Although I confess, most of the time, if I accidentally find myself at Emacs, the way I get out of it is I find the process and I kill it. That's honest to God, 30 plus years, that's still how I get out of Emacs. I'm sorry. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just not for me.
I wasn't sure if that was a B or an F there. I just had to check.
I am keeping this, nice and PG at
Clean,
least, PG-13
yes, exactly,
maybe.
Exactly. So if you could choose another profession, what would it be?
Anything that gets me away from the bloody computer. Probably something with my hands. Sewing, upholstery, refinishing, woodworking, gardening, cooking, something where at the end of the day, I can look at something and go, yes, I made progress. I have this thing, which is not really something you can do so much in corporate strategy.
Okay, cool. So Tammy and I are just iterating on the questions in the background here. Okay. So now we get to the questions that I added. How about that?
Wait, come on. I added like one or two.
You added maybe most of the ones.
Maybe half of one. Yeah, I added the boring ones.
Yeah. So
no.
So now we're into the this or that round. Would you like to work alone or work with a team?
It depends.
Gosh dang it. I knew you were going to say that.
Sorry.
All right. Book or ebook?
It depends.
I'm gonna smack you. How can I reach through Zoom and smack someone? Is there a button I can press? Smack the participant?
I'm sorry. Brian knows where I live. Next time we can travel, he can smack you or smack me for you.
All right.
Wait, no. We can't just keep skipping to the next question. I need to hear the explanation of it depends. So I am requesting a rewind to the team or versus alone question and why it depends. I am requesting a rewind, Tim, right now. Rewind.
All right.
Why it depends. It depends upon what I'm working on. Frequently, because I have been telecommuting for more than 13 years, I am used to working on my own. But I know that I'm not infallible. I need other people there to help me with things. They have other skills, other knowledge. And so what frequently will happen is I will start working on something and then speak with the team, or I will get a marching orders from on high, and I go to the team and I say, hey team, look, there's this thing. How are we going to split this up? But right now, that's not the mode I'm in. And so right now, everything is solo.
That's true.
Um,
That's true. All
Okay.
right.
Now I need the, it depends for the ebook or book
Next
now.
question.
Before you do the next one. No, I need to know.
I'll let that one slide. I'll let that one
No,
slide.
no, you can't. I need to
How
know,
did you add?
Tim.
Why did you add? Let me ask you a question, Tammy.
Me? No,
Why
I'm not in part of this. No, I'm
No, why
moving.
did you
Hear
add?
my mother
Why did you
calling
add?
me. I gotta go.
Why did you add book or ebook?
I don't know, I don't know. All right, I'll tell you why I added it. I didn't want to
Depends
say
on if
this.
I have to wear my glasses or not.
No, you don't know. No, okay. So here's the thing. Like at night, I like to read off of my phone until it bangs me on the head when I fall asleep. But during the day, I like to grab a book. I like the feel of the paper in my hands, and I like to turn the pages. I like the smell of the book. I mean, but that's during the day. But at night, I'm just trying to wind down. And I know I'm going to fall asleep while I'm doing it because it's I'm
Well,
tired.
the answer is it depends, right?
Yes, that is the answer.
See?
But at least I expanded. I want to know why Vicky has her depends. Like mine, it's because during the day I like the books, in your hand, and at night I like the ebooks on my phone. Vicky, why do you have a depends answer for that question?
During the day, I am almost exclusively reading things for professional development. And so they're books about strategy, they're books about business, there's books about, writing. I've been reading a fair bit of that lately. Those I can focus on better and I absorb better in hard copy. My brain just works better, especially during the day. At night, I'm reading to wind down just before I fall asleep, and I am in my bed. Holding a book while I'm lying in bed is really uncomfortable and it hurts my elbow. B, I've got a Kobo. So I want my cheesy sci-fi and fantasy on my Kobo. It's just easier for me to curl up in bed with the cats and read in the evening on my Kobo. So I want everything in the
Kobo?
evening.
It's a reader.
Yeah.
But do I live under a rock? Tim, you are not allowed to answer that question.
I've seen your rock. Sorry.
It's an independent e-ink reader.
Oh, it's e-ink? Really?
It's actually Canadian.
Yeah.
I think.
Oh,
it is Canadian, actually. Although I think
Yes.
it might have been purchased by someone recently.
Yeah, I
how do
think
you
so.
spell
It
it? Because
started out
now
of
I want to go
Canada.
buy one. Kobo.
Kobo.
Oh.
It's like a Kindle.
It's
Yeah,
a
but
Kindle, but independent.
E-ink. I love e-ink. Like,
It's
okay.
great. This thing goes forever on a single charge.
Okay, this is going to be a tough question to get an answer out of, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Form or function?
Function. That's no question.
Not even it depends. Oh, wait, there's a but.
No. It has to be. Function is better, but it is totally possible and ideal to have something that is pretty and functional.
Right. Okay.
So if it's simply pretty and doing nothing, then I have no need for it. It has to have a purpose and it has to be good at that purpose, but it also can be very nicely designed after that.
So I'll put my art degree aside for a minute. Okay. Never mind. Moving on. Pen or pencil?
Pen, fountain pen.
Really?
Ooh.
Fountain pen with the whole ink thing and everything?
Yes. A friend got me into them and it's an expensive hobby. I don't recommend it, but it's fun.
Yeah.
And then you get technicolor hands when you refill your pens.
Did you do the thing where you squish the pen down to make it like wider and narrower and all that stuff?
Not with my pens.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, that's why they have the split nib, right?
No, that's actually to feed the ink down.
Okay. All right. Okay.
It's capillary action.
Right. Right. Okay. So last question, I think. Star Wars or Star Trek?
Both.
No. Okay,
well,
gotta
here
pick
you go.
one.
Doctor Who.
Good answer. I'll accept that. Well, you could also said Firefly too, but yeah.
No, you cannot say Firefly. No Firefly. Anyone who has listened to our other show will know that this is a point of
Firefly free
contention.
zone. Yes.
Yeah, it's a Firefly free zone. I can't even say that without messing it up. Okay, so Doctor Who. See, we might have to readdress these questions, Tim. Okay,
That's
if you're
true,
going to
yeah.
say Doctor Who, then I personally
no,
need
not
to.
this question.
Yes, yes, Tim. This question: what number?
4.
What?
Good answer.
He was my first doctor.
All
Mine
right.
too. Good
Yeah,
answer.
I know. I feel outnumbered now. Like,
No, I think
There
mine
is
was
no
3.
wrong answer
no,
for
there's
this.
not. But there's a more right. There's a more right answer. No.
No,
No.
there is no wrong answer. We do not judge. We are accepting and inclusive of people who prefer all doctors.
It's all the same doctor.
Exactly.
Yeah, but 10, 11, but
There's a
4.
video.
Not 11.
What? No. Wait, what happened to being okay with all answers?
Some answers are wrong. 11 and 12 are wrong.
Really? Hmm.
Yeah. And it's not their fault. Actually, as doctors and as actors and performers, they did a great job. It was just the writing in those particular eras needed a bit of work.
So 4 because that was your first doctor. And
He was my
I
doctor.
can kind of see that because technically 9 was my, quote unquote first doctor, but I didn't fall in love until 10. And then 11 took me a little getting used to, but I warmed up to him. So
It's hard not to fall in love with the 10th Doctor. I mean, it's just
yeah.
yeah.
Don't the companions have anything to do with your feelings?
To some extent, I mean, I have companion opinions as well, but they yes and no to some extent.
So
Like
who's your favorite
Clara.
companion?
Oh, Ace.
Really?
Yep.
Are you Tim and you should just go off without me because
No.
I feel like I'm in my own world now.
Now, Tim and Brian should go off without me
Right?
then, because
What?
he leaves me in the dust. He is so good at all of this Doctor Who stuff. And I got so much Doctor Who that I watch, but his memory is great on this stuff, and he just knows so much about the lore, and it's really impressive.
Sorry, Tim and I are chatting behind the scenes. We're like, you being our first number 1 guest here, we're like, so should this be part of an after show or like?
So,
how
but
should
I
we-
have another question for you. I have another question for you, Tammy.
For me, no,
Yeah.
I'm not being interviewed.
Yeah, no, this
You
is
are
a
now.
very important question. How are you going to wrap this up?
I don't know. I haven't really thought that far ahead. Like, so
So you need an editor, is what you're saying?
yeah, I do. Yeah.
You should ask your editor. They can help you come up with conclusions. They'll tell you
Thanks.
when you need one.
Oh, goodness. No, I don't know how to wrap this up beyond other than here we go. Let's try this. I for one, I have absolutely loved our first show. I love that Vicky was our number 1 guest on this show, our first guest. I love that Tim is joining me on this new adventure for the Pragmatic Bookshelf. I love everything about this. And Vicky, your book, I can't even say enough about it because and your editor, Brian McDonald, I absolutely, you can ask him. I am over the moon about him. I respect him to the ends of the earth. I can go on and on and on, but then I'll feel like a weirdo for doing so, so I'm not going to. But what I can say to wrap up this show is, Vicky, thank you so much for agreeing to meet with us, agreeing to come on this show, agreeing to be our, quote unquote, I keep using that phrase and I hate it, guinea
Premier
pig.
guest, our
Premier
guest.
guest. I cannot thank you enough. And I hope that our listeners go out and number 1, read your book. Number 2, go out and if there's something that they want to write, if there is a technology or something that they are passionate about and they want to write about it, to reach out to somebody, find out what it takes to become an author. Just ask the questions. As my mother used to tell me, you can ask any question and no one is allowed to hit you. Just ask your question. So that's it. I guess we're just going to wrap up and Vicky, thank you again. And maybe from here we'll do a segue into the after show. I don't know. We'll
Before
see
you
what
do
goes.
that,
Oh wait,
though,
I'll see.
before you
Tim
do
always
that-
throws a wrench in. You know, I was trying to be like really cool with my wrap up, and he's like, "Hey, wrap up the show."
I'm a professional
Let me throw this
podcaster.
in.
Excuse me.
I was too until I quit.
So before we wrap up,
Before
Vicky,
there's always.
can
a
you
before.
tell our listeners how to get in touch with you
Yes.
and what the name of your book is that Tammy's skirting around?
Wait, no. You start over because I messed it all up on you. I was like talking all over you.
So before we wrap up, Vicky, can you tell our listeners where to get in touch with you and what you're working on next?
What I'm working on next is ask me in a couple of weeks. I have a meeting next week for somebody, and so I just don't want to put any carts before any horses. But so I will put that one on the shelf for a bit. You can get in touch with me at my website, vmbrasseur.com. That's Victor Michael Bravo, RASSEUR.com. And there's a contact page on there, so you can go find me.
Well, Vicky, again, thank you for being our number one guest. I appreciate you taking the time. I don't want to speak for Tim, but I'm going to anyway because I'm so good at it. I'm sure he's laughing over there, but I'm sure he appreciates it too. Thank you for being with us and telling us about your journey. Thank you very much.
I'm really, really honored that I got to be the first one, and this was been super fun. So other authors, do this. This has been great. These two are awesome at this.
Thanks for listening to the Pragmatic Hero's Journey. We hope you enjoyed the show. For more information about the Pragmatic Hero's Journey, please visit pragprog.com or send an email to pragtalk@pragprog.org. Your hero's journey has just begun.